This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth, buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
October 14, 2024. 11:19 p.m. A 911 dispatcher in Decatur, Georgia, answered a call. The man on the line reported a fall. His voice did not shake. It was calm, unnervingly calm, each word delivered as though rehearsed. Outside, Robinson Avenue lay still. Porch lights glowed faintly against the dark. A dog barked once and went quiet. Curtains were drawn, televisions switched off, families climbing into bed. To the neighbors, it was an ordinary night. Inside one house, it was anything but. First responders entered within minutes. Their boots creaked against hardwood floors, gloves snapped into place, flashlights sliced through the dim. At the base of the staircase, they found her. Evelyn Porter-Reed. Her body broken in ways that did not belong to a simple fall. Her glasses rested unshattered on the fourth step. Blood pooled where it should not have. The angle of her body whispered of something staged. One officer knelt, lifted a cloth from beneath a planter, and caught the sharp scent of cleaner. Even in those first minutes, details clashed with the story being told. By morning, yellow tape wrapped around the small house, and the questions began circling. Not among the neighbors, who assumed it was tragedy. But among the detectives who knew scenes do not lie. A smear up the banister. A clock that ticked too neatly. A silence that made no sense. What happened that night on Robinson Avenue? And who, if anyone, had ensured that Evelyn Porter-Reed would never see the morning? To understand the silence of that night, you must understand the life it ended. Evelyn Porter-Reed was 59. A nurse who knew exhaustion by name, who carried her patient's pain home on her shoulders but never let it dim her warmth. In her handbag, she kept a prayer notebook, worn at the edges, pages crowded with scripture and the names of people she loved. Naomi, her eldest, 32. Caleb, 29. Every entry was a quiet reminder of what mattered most. Her house on Robinson Avenue was modest, a two-story home that carried decades of routine. The wooden staircase creaked under familiar weight, and Evelyn always checked its rail. She pressed her fingers to the screws, reminding Caleb to tighten them. "One day you'll thank me," she teased. To her, caution was not paranoia, it was care. She had built her life around steadiness, but even steady lives fracture. Her marriage of 33 years ended bitterly in early 2024. Marcus Reed, the man she once trusted with everything, was gone. Within months, he remarried. His new wife, Tiana Brooks, was 28, younger than his own daughter. The speed of it cut deep, though Evelyn rarely spoke of it aloud. She bore her hurt quietly, letting her routines carry her forward. Neighbors remembered her humming hymns on the porch at dusk, the soft glow of her light switching on as the street darkened. She waved at passers-by, offered advice with gentle firmness, and carried herself with dignity. She was careful. She was deliberate. She noticed things others missed. That was why the staircase mattered. Why the rail mattered. Why, when detectives stood in her home and saw her at the bottom of those steps, something in their gut told them this could not be chance. For Evelyn, safety was habit. For investigators, her habits would become evidence. The night of October 14, 2024, began like so many others for Evelyn. At 7:12 p.m., she sent Naomi a heart emoji, her small way of saying, "I'm here." Naomi smiled at the screen, not knowing it would be the last message she would ever receive. At 10:41 p.m., Evelyn's smart lock recorded a keypad entry. No forced latch. No guest codes active. Whoever came in knew the numbers. They knew the house. They knew her. Minutes later, Evelyn's smartwatch spiked, heart rate climbing sharply. At 11:19 p.m., Marcus Reed's voice carried calmly across a 911 line, reporting a fall. Too calm. Paramedics rushed in expecting chaos but found stillness. Evelyn lay at the foot of her staircase, her body broken in a way the scene itself refused to explain. Her glasses sat neatly on the fourth step, unbroken. Blood pooled low and slow, inconsistent with a tumbling fall. The staircase rail showed smears, not the grasp of a slipping hand but the wipe of something removed. Near the entryway, beneath a planter, an officer lifted a cloth that reeked of citrus cleaner. Under the right light later, faint stains glowed where cleaner had tried, and failed, to erase. Every drawer was shut. Jewelry untouched. Her purse sat by the door. No robbery. No forced entry. Neighbors added fragments to the silence. One saw headlights pause briefly at Evelyn's driveway before rolling on. Another heard hurried footsteps on gravel, the rhythm quick, fading into the dark. Not faces, not certainty, just slivers of a night that already felt wrong. Detectives left the house with questions stacked on questions. They knew accidents tell one story. This house told another. In the days that followed, investigators chased shadows. The SUV spotted near Evelyn's driveway was traced through traffic cameras. Each lead unraveled into ordinary life, a delivery driver finishing his shift, a nurse heading home from an overnight, a cousin visiting family 2 doors down. None linked to Evelyn. The car that had carried suspicion was just another vehicle in the night. The footsteps faltered too. Officers timed their own approach, matched distances, and realized anyone running near Evelyn's home in that window would have crossed paths with first responders. None did. What neighbors heard was sound without source, amplified by darkness. Then detectives turned to the burglary angle. Indicator, break-ins left scars, shattered locks, pried doors, stripped drawers. Evelyn's home bore none of them. Everything in its place. Valuables untouched. It was a house disturbed not by thieves, but by something closer. One memory, however, refused to dissolve. Naomi recalled her mother's voice weeks earlier, quiet but uneasy. Evelyn had mentioned the old key box mounted by the porch. Too many people know that code. I don't like it, she had said, shaking her head. Naomi had dismissed it as caution. After the funeral, those words replayed like a warning she had failed to hear. The outside leads collapsed, one after another, until only silence remained. No burglars. No prowlers. No strangers in the dark. The evidence pointed not to someone breaking in, but to someone who already belonged inside, or had once belonged. And in that shrinking circle, suspicion found its target. The body does not lie. By the morning of October 15, 2024, Evelyn's story shifted from her staircase to the medical examiner's table. Under harsh fluorescent light, her injuries spoke one by one. Rounded bruises pressed into her arms like fingerprints. Faint abrasions lined her knuckles, the subtle marks of someone who resisted. Across her neck, a scatter of shallow scratches. And on her skull, a fracture angled not as though from tumbling, but from direct impact. Then came the telling detail, lividity. Blood had settled in places that didn't match the position in which paramedics found her. She had been moved. Accidents leave victims where they fall. Evelyn had not. Toxicology was clean, no alcohol, no sedatives, no drugs to dull her balance. She had been alert, sober, living her habits of caution right until her final minutes. From the scene, the lab pulled sharper truths. On the upper screws of the stair rail, fingerprints appeared in layers. Evelyn's beneath, Marcus's above. Clear, recent. Evidence of a hand that had touched after hers. A single synthetic fiber clung to her sleeve, dark and coarse. Under magnification, it matched the weave of a jacket Marcus had been photographed in. Technicians described how they'd lifted it, tweezers pinching the thread from the fabric, sealed instantly into evidence. Small, but loud. And the cloth. Under ultraviolet light, faint specks glowed where citrus cleaner had smeared blood but could not erase it. The wipe meant to silence the house had, instead, preserved its testimony. By the time the report was signed, the examiner's words left little room: the manner of death cannot be classified as accidental. And with science as anchor, suspicion hardened into accusation. By late October, investigators moved. Marcus Reed was brought in first. At 60, he carried himself with a calm that felt rehearsed. He sat in the interrogation room, back straight, hands folded, voice even. When pressed about the fingerprints on the rail, he insisted they were old. Years of living there, he said, would leave prints everywhere. But when asked the last time he visited, his mask slipped. He shifted in his chair, eyes dropping to the table, tongue flicking against his lips before he spoke. The pause spoke louder than the answer. Days later, it was Tiana Brooks's turn. 28, dressed simply in jeans and a cardigan, hair pulled back tight. She told detectives she had been home that night, just scrolling, she said. The phrase repeated, almost rehearsed. When questions touched her marriage, her fingers circled her ring, twisting it without stop. At one point she paused so long before answering that an investigator noted the silence as carefully as any word. By the week's end, the indictments came. Marcus Reed, charged with murder and staging a crime scene. Tiana Brooks, charged as an accessory, accused of helping to cover what had been done. The sight of Marcus leaving court in cuffs spread fast through the neighborhood. He had once coached children, stood as a community figure. Now, chain at his wrists, eyes fixed ahead, he became something else. Tiana walked behind deputies, head bowed, her hand slipping once more toward the ring that no longer promised freedom. In the first hearings, prosecutors laid their case plain: bruises shaped like hands, digital logs of entry, a 40-minute gap before 911. The defense countered sharply. They held up the cloth, argued contamination. They said fingerprints linger for years, fibers transfer without intent, grief clouds judgment. Their words cut with precision, planting the seed of doubt. Naomi sat in the gallery, her mother's prayer notebook pressed against her chest. Caleb clenched fists on his knees, jaw rigid. Their presence reminded everyone that this was more than exhibits and testimony. It was family, fractured. And as Marcus and Tiana were led back into custody, the case moved toward its sharpest stage, trial, where motive, memory, and evidence would clash in full light. June 9, 2025. 9:02 a.m. The gavel fell, and the courtroom rose. 12 jurors filed into their seats, eyes shifting between the judge, the prosecution's table stacked with binders, and the defense, Marcus Reed, jaw set, cufflinks gleaming faintly, and beside him, Tiana Brooks, hands folded tight, her ring turning slowly between her fingers. Naomi and Caleb sat in the second row, close enough to hear every word, too far to change a single one. Naomi carried her mother's prayer notebook, a small anchor of faith in a room filled with evidence. Caleb's fists pressed against his knees, knuckles pale. The prosecutor's opening was measured, built like a staircase, one step leading into the next. He promised the jury a story told by time itself, a smart lock at 10:41 p.m., a watch that spiked then went silent, bruises shaped like fingertips, a cloth that glowed under ultraviolet light. He played the 11:19 p.m. 911 call, Marcus's voice calm when most are frantic. The recording ended, and silence fell heavy, longer than the call itself. The medical examiner was first on the stand. He traced Evelyn's injuries with steady words: fingertip bruises on her arms, abrasions on her knuckles, scratches on her neck, a fracture angled wrong for a fall. He explained lividity, the way her body's blood had settled, proving she had been moved. On cross, the defense pressed, could bruises come from bumping furniture? Could scratches be self-inflicted? The examiner conceded possibilities but repeated firmly, the manner of death cannot be classified as accidental. Digital forensics followed. The analyst walked the jury through logs, the lock at 10:41, the thermostat sudden flicker to away at 9:18 then back to home at 9:30, Evelyn's watch going still before midnight. The defense leaned hard on the word glitch, suggesting neighbors' Wi-Fi interference. But the analyst explained, glitches don't line up neatly with a lock code and a heart rate ending minutes later. Then came the lab technician. Under ultraviolet light, she showed faint stains glowing on the cloth. She explained how cleaners smear but don't erase, how prints on the stair screws showed Marcus's above Evelyn's, fresher than hers. A fiber lifted from Evelyn's sleeve matched a jacket Marcus had worn. The defense held the cloth up for the jury, insisting it could have been contaminated, but the technician walked carefully through seals, timestamps, and custody. One juror scribbled quickly, others leaned forward. Neighbors spoke briefly. One recalled headlights pausing at Evelyn's driveway, another remembered footsteps breaking into a run. Both admitted doubt, but their words set the scene in motion. A friend testified Evelyn had teased Caleb weeks earlier about tightening the rail, her voice cracking as she recalled the moment. It was a reminder, Evelyn had not been careless. She had been careful. Neither Marcus nor Tiana took the stand. The judge reminded jurors that silence is a right, not a signal. Still, the absence weighed heavy. Closing arguments came on June 11, 4:06 p.m. The prosecutor walked the timeline step by step, the heart emoji at 7:12, the SUV passes at 8:03 and 8:27, the thermostat at 9:18, the lock at 10:41, the watch ending at 10:52, the call at 11:19. He said, motive can be simple, money, a new life built too fast, but clocks don't lie. He let the timeline speak. The defense countered, voice steady but urgent. Houses, they said, keep prints for years. Fibers transfer without intent. Technology falters. Grief creates patterns where none exist. Do not convict from shadows, the defense warned. Jurors listened, silent. The judge gave instructions, and the 12 filed out, notepads tucked close, faces unreadable. Naomi whispered to Caleb that she could still smell her mother's soap on the pages of the notebook. Caleb touched her shoulder. Hours stretched. Then, at 9:47 p.m., the jury returned. The foreperson stood, holding a folded slip of paper. The clerk unfolded the slip, read silently, then aloud. 2 words struck the room like a hammer: guilty. Guilty. Marcus Reed, guilty of murder. Tiana Brooks, guilty of accessory. Naomi pressed the prayer notebook to her chest, tears running as Caleb wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Caleb himself sat rigid, a single tear on his cheek, jaw locked. For them, justice was no victory. It was confirmation of what they had feared since that night. The father who once carried them on his shoulders had ended their mother's life. Marcus did not weep or rage. He sat still, lips thin, cufflinks gleaming, but when deputies reached for his wrists, his hand twitched once, a flicker of anger cracking the calm mask. Tiana lowered her head, twisted her ring one last time before officers led her away. Weeks later came sentencing. The courtroom was quieter, the crowd smaller, but the air still heavy. The judge delivered the terms with steady voice: Marcus Reed, life imprisonment without parole. Tiana Brooks, 10 years in state prison. The gavel fell, final. Outside, headlines replayed the 911 call. Neighbors left flowers on Evelyn's porch, where her light still clicked on at dusk. A choir member remembered her laugh during rehearsals, light and sudden. Detectives laid out the evidence: lock logs, rail screws, the cloth glowing under ultraviolet, and said softly, "This was Evelyn's testimony. She spoke through her habits." Naomi and Caleb walked out together, notebook in hand, knowing no sentence could return their mother. But the verdict gave her voice back. On Robinson Avenue, the staircase rail gleamed faintly in the morning light. The same rail Evelyn had pressed with her fingers, reminding Caleb to tighten. It remained steady now, silent but unyielding. True crime is never only about the crime. It is about families altered, neighbors unsettled, and ordinary routines, the flip of a switch, the turn of a screw, that become extraordinary in hindsight. Evelyn Porter-Reed's story ended in violence, but her care carried forward. And so, when the verdict was read, it was not only the jury's voice. It was Evelyn's.